again for coming to this conference. This is the Sexual Purity Conference, and my name is Tiffany Fuson, and I'm 28, and I'm devoted to sexual purity. And I believe in the truth that the Bible teaches that sexual relationship is to be reserved specifically for marriage. And I will present to you the benefits and reasons for choosing abstinence and strategies to keep you sexually pure. And I want to teach you not just about keeping yourself sexually pure if you've been abstinent, but in God's love and God's forgiveness if you've already had sex, that there is forgiveness in God's love and you can always start over. So I want to start with the benefits of abstinence. We're just going to run through a couple real quick. The biggest issue is that sex before marriage is a sin. So it creates a separation between you and God. So the benefit of abstinence is that pure communication with God. There's no disruption in your relationship with God. Be very aware of the friends that are going to be supportive of your decisions and those ones that are going to tear you down. And if you have friends that are going to tear you down because of the decisions you make, whether it's staying sexually pure or not drinking or whatever decisions you make, if they're not supportive, then it might be to question whether or not those are the people that you should hang out with. Mind. So if you have already committed into your mind something that you might do, you might think it's just a thought, but one thought leads into another thought, leads into another thought, and it becomes a pattern and a way of thinking. And that way of thinking will lead you into wrong actions. You also have to worry about the people that you date, and this leads into dating only people that are your spiritual equal. It's best you don't want to date anybody. My grandma always said, you don't date anybody you wouldn't marry. And I never thought of that as being a big deal, because there would be tons of people that I would hang out with or that I would date that I was like, well, I'm not ready to get married yet. I'm just not ready. And so I would think that it was part of the experience. All your friends tell you it's part of the experience of just dating and figuring out what you do and don't want. The problem is that you might fall for somebody that is what you don't want. The problem comes in where some people don't feel guilty for doing things we all know are wrong. Some people don't feel guilty for cheating on their spouse. They just don't feel bad. And I don't know how that is, but the only thing that makes sense to me is when you sin and you don't feel bad about it, it shows where your relationship is with God. There's a pastor, he always talks about certain things are locators. And this is one of them. If you don't feel bad about sin, it helps you locate your relationship with God. Where are you in your relationship with God? If you can sin, whether it be sexual sin or any sin, and not feel bad. There's an issue with sin, and this talks about taking every thought captive. So the sin didn't start with the sexual act. The sin started with the thought, whether it be watching bad movies, whether it be just focusing on what it would be like to be with somebody, whether it be kissing or whatever, and one thought leads to another thought. Very rarely is there going to be sex without many thoughts leading up to that actual action. More people are likely to cheat outside of marriage. People still cheat inside of marriage, but almost everybody will tell you they don't have as much of a commitment. People feel less cheating on a girlfriend or boyfriend or somebody they're seeing than somebody they're married to. And what if he cheats? There's been several girls that have told me they've ended up with sexually transmitted diseases in their very first relationship. Somebody that they thought they were totally committed to, they were in a monogamous relationship, so they weren't being safe, and they ended up with herpes. Fresh. And most people don't, they're scared because they think of sex as something you can't go back on. You can't start over. You can't be in a relationship where you've already slept together and start over. And it depends. It depends on whether or not that person is somebody who's willing to commit to the same standard you are. Do they have the same devotion to God that you have? If they truly love God, then they should feel guilty, and they should want to make it right with God. And you should want to make it right with God as well. And if that relationship is going to be blessed by God, it would require repentance and starting over and starting fresh, and kind of require the same kind of things that a person who hasn't had sex, the same guidelines somebody would have to follow for being in a relationship, which is you have to be careful the person you're dating. They have to be Christian. They have to have your same values. They have to be on the same page with you as far as the level of sexuality that you feel comfortable to. But people who confess to be Christians and violate God's law on purpose are the reason people view Christians as hypocrites. We have a high standard to live up to, and none of us are perfect, and we know that. But we should at least try. We should at least try when people complain about there not being good Christians in a church, and oh, I would love to go to church, but they would just kick me out. And then the one thing that I can tell people is that churches are full of sinners. You're not going to find a perfect church because there's not perfect people who go there. So people on the outside, maybe they shouldn't be so judgmental because they know that there's these broken people. Broken people are coming in to seek God to be healed and to be fixed. But we certainly don't want our testimony to be the reason that they don't come. And my one friend, that she had been married before. She'd actually been married twice before. And she was getting married for the third time. And I didn't know her before she was engaged to this last man. She said her other two husbands were Christians, but I know that she did not wait to have sex. This third time she did wait. And I said, well, everybody else makes it seem so hard after you have sex. How do you go back? How do you start over? And her husband was older too. He was in his 40s. And I said, how do you go back and how do you wait? And she said, because it's not just about me. She said, it's about God's standard. And she said, it's honoring that perspective of keeping your purity. She said, do you know how horrible I would feel if somebody asked me to pray for them and God didn't hear me because I was sinning? I don't know hardly any relationship where sex doesn't hurt somebody. If it's not a biblical relationship, it hurts somebody, whether it's somebody's feelings, it's somebody's reputation, it brings children into the world. That yes, maybe, every child is a blessing, but that child is paying for our mistakes. That child that is brought into the world without two parents gets the lesser version of parenthood because of somebody's mistakes, and that's not fair. You do the best that you can do with what you have, and if you've already made mistakes, you do the best and you get right with God. But if you haven't made those mistakes, or you're starting over and you're like, the next relationship is going to be different, there's reasons for it, and because God has a plan. And if you're going to bring a child into the world, you want to be the best parent you can be and give them the best home that you can. The best witness is your life. People will start to follow you just because if you start to make radical changes in your life to get right with God, and you do that regardless of how other people are looking at you, they will see the positive changes in your life. And it's inevitable. You might go through hard times, but God guarantees His benefits and His provision over His children. And when you honor Him, you get the rewards. But when you disobey, it's like any parent. Any loving parent lets you reap the consequences of your behavior because it's the only way you learn.